Hi everybody, this is Craig Tanner for The Mindful Eye and The Daily Critique. Today's image was submitted by Flo, who's an advanced photographer from New Jersey. I'm going to give you the metadata and the backstory first. Flo shot this with a Nikon D300 using a 50mm lens at f1.8 at 1/4000th of a second at ISO 500. And we know a good bit about the backstory because Flo created this image on the Mindful Eye's Next Step workshop in Savannah, Georgia. On that workshop, we do a fair amount of street photography. We do a fair amount of approaching people that we're just meeting on the street to take their picture and to do portraits. So this is somebody that Flo has just met in a square in Savannah. One of the things I like right away about this image is the idea of gesture and the expression. And so I want to talk about those things on a couple of different levels. Once you get over the fear, if you have a fear of approaching strangers with your camera, then a big question that people have is, okay, now I understand that a lot of people will say yes and they really want to play along, but how do I then get people to relax in front of the camera? And one of the most powerful ways that I know of to get people to relax is to give them a prop. When you give people a prop, you give them a chance to put themselves into a story that doesn't involve observing themselves being photographed, and that's what Flo has done here. She's given this woman her journal and given her a little bit of a prompt in terms of what to do, and now the woman, because of the journal, can have an experience that's a lot more relaxed. The prop also creates another layer of information. In this case, with it being the journal and with the gesture looking up and thinking, there's a whole story now that's happening, and you now get a chance for the gesture, the expression, to connect to the prop, and it just adds a very powerful layer of story to the image. On a practical level, let's say if we were directing people in terms of gesture, as far as their hands and their arms and the way they're standing, this probably couldn't be any better if you just sat there and really sort of micromanage the way this person is standing. Her body has an S-curve to it. She has more weight on one leg than another. Her head is tilted. She's looking away from the camera and looking up, which can be more interesting than just looking straight into the camera. And when you look at this hand in particular, it's just really beautiful what's happening in terms of quality of line and both the positive and negative space shapes that are being implied. And same thing with this hand. This holding the journal looks very relaxed, very nice, elegant lines. I just assisted Brian Allen, one of my favorite photographers, on a workshop that he taught in Savannah, Georgia called Location People. And one of the things that Brian emphasized over and over again in terms of working with models or with people you're just meeting, if there's something on the human form that can bend, then make sure that it's bending, which just gets you away from hands or arms or legs or your whole body or your face that's very static. And this is a really good example of the kind of thing that Brian teaches when he talks to people about posing or getting people to look more natural or more elegant in front of the camera. Some other things that I like about this image is I like this dramatic quality of light. This is in the brightest part of the day. It's in a square, and so you have model light kind of pouring through the live oak trees, and it's really beautiful how there's a spotlight effect on the main subject here, and a little bit of that light in the eyes. I'm also enjoying the dynamic color here. You have the potential for some neat color relationships in this image. You've got the idea of blue playing off of green from the painter's color wheel. You also, from the printer's color wheel, have the idea of red and cyan potential. You have a nice rhythm potentially of color, the reflection of the sky and the tree canopy and this woman's glasses, and then you pick that up again back here where we preserve a little bit of detail above her head. The other thing that I really like about this image is just real strong movement on one of the diagonals. There's a very powerful feeling of moving all the way up on this diagonal through the image. And I think that works really well. Something else I love about this image is it's a portrait with a fairly busy background, both in terms of contrast and just the subjects that are back there. And because Flo shot this at f1.8 with a very fast 50mm lens, she's using a very wide open aperture. The shallow depth of field is helping to simplify what is actually a pretty complicated background. When I think about perfect world improvement for this image, for most people they would say, well, it's pretty obvious that this image as it came out of the camera is pretty dark. And one of the things that I would like to do is lighten it up quite a bit. But as I lighten it, I really want to pay attention to what is my main subject and sort of visual movement and balance. And so I'm going to talk more about that in just a minute. Another thing that I would like to do here is I would actually like to rescale a part of this image. One of the things that's happening in this image is everything about this woman looks very elegant, but then when we get to this part of her body, we have a big flat negative space shape here, and this is a good example of sort of the camera lying. That shoulder and that arm is one of the closest things to the camera besides the journal in the image. And so if you were standing there and you were looking at this woman, you would not perceive her arm to be this big, but the camera, because of the perspective distortions that get fixed into place, is creating this illusion of her arm being very big. And it's not pleasing to me if we're talking about trying to shoot a glorifying portrait in a couple of different ways. One, it makes her arm look bigger than it actually is relative to the rest of her body. And two, it is just a big flat negative space shape in an image that has a lot of elegant arcing lines over and over and over again. We're seeing that in a lot of different ways in the image.